Hey guys, it's Caliber here. I wanted to take some time to show a deck idea or a deck concept that I've been brewing up and labbing just a little bit throughout the past couple weeks. This is post Chaos Origins, so this is going to be Phantom Knight, Mitsurugi, Horus, which is three engines. It's not quite a P-side deck, but the thought process behind building this deck, other than being really excited to try the new Phantom Knight stuff, of course, I'm a big fan of this deck. It's one of the first decks that helped me get into the competitive landscape. Shout out to early days Master Duel. But the reason why I decided to go with a bunch of different engines rather than maybe some of the standard Phantom Knights decks you've been seeing is because I'm really not a fan of the current non-engine format or the non-engine expectations, which is if you make these pretty standard boards, a lot of people are very afraid that they're susceptible to like super poly, fall in the virtuous, just board breaker meta. But the thing about hand traps too is, well, I do think Phantom Knights as a standalone deck can play very well through hand traps. I think that ultimately you shouldn't be trying to play the same game as your opponents when the format is either going to be super heavy board breaker or super heavy hand traps. So when you have multiple engines, especially with the ones that we're playing, you kind of have a game plan into one half of the room or the other, which is you can make pretty wide boards that aren't going to crumble under one super poly or one, like droplet or something, where you also have a deck that can naturally play through hand traps, naturally play through boards, and then establish another engine on the field after you've already played through to pretty much secure your position on the board. So we're going to get into it, and then I'll talk about kind of like the theory or the expectation card by card. But one thing, actually, stay here for a second. Sorry, one card that I should bring up right now is Evil Swarm Ophion, which is a really sick card, a really sick floodgate that you can naturally play in this deck pretty well. The reason we're not running it is because there are two engines that you play that this kills immediately. And while this is a really good check to some decks like maybe Doomsy or Draco Tail branded, unfortunately, this is not a card that we can afford to play, as you could say it hurts us more than it hurts them. So we'll go into the main deck. It's 51. I could not for the life of me find the last card to remove. I do not want to go over 50. Or actually, sorry, I did end up going over 50. But we had to make one really weird cut to one of the engine pieces, so we can talk about that after. But we are going to start with the Horus package, which is the 3 Imseti, the 1 Dwamatef, and the 1 Happy. Now, the reason you play 3 names, even though it's a little bit brickier, is because you just want to be able to have bodies to try to climb up into Rusty Bardish. So whether you're using the Horus part of the engine or you're using the Mitsurugi line, you always have a way to effectively clear into 2 bodies. So zombie vampire, revive a name, make dark or something, and then go into Rusty Bardish, or the Mitsu line kind of does something similar. But you just want to make sure that you have engines that are good standalone pieces rather than just like, it's just Imseti, revive the brick, make 1 rank 8, and then that was the whole thing. I just like the idea that instead of trying to cut some of these bricks to play more non-engine, you could just play these engines to their full capacity, and you can find other discard outlets, such as the Imseti, to kind of pitch your bricks if they're dead in your hand, to pretty much always convert your cards. That's one thing you'll notice about this deck is the way it's built is you're not really approaching it from a 1-card combo standpoint, although that is probably a way more consistent game plan. You, unfortunately, are going to have to try to look at your whole hand and look at your approach before you play out your turn and then say, all right, this isn't just a, Rhoda gets me into the game-winning shot here. It's going to be, how do I use the Mitsu cards or how do I use the Horus cards to break apart my opponent's field, and then use the Phantom Knights cards to secure the rest of the game. And then, of course, one king sarcophagus to supplement all this. I was thinking of playing two for a second discard outlet, but with the way I built the deck, initially what I had in mind was maxing out on cards like Ancient Cloak to kind of maximize on anytime you were discarding, you were always finding your engine pieces. But I find that the deck is consistent enough to get into one engine or the other that you really don't need it. And it is another brick anyway. So we're just going to go ahead and leave it at this for now. This is slim, but it's still potent, is the best way I would describe it. Onto the actual Phantom Knights cards. Here is three of the new card, the Decayed Cloak. This is the reveal one in hand to special summon, specifically the Phantom Knights card, so not just Phantom Knights. So be careful on the wording. It does have a graveyard effect to treat certain bodies as level 3s, so this helps for getting out of awkward board states where maybe you need to make like a break sword or something. But Ancient Cloak is just another nice card to have. Searches, it's there, but clearly the better card that came out of this deck this set, I would say, is Doom Solar Ray. This is a Sidra. If you could, well, sorry, I should say, if you control no monsters, you can special summon it, and then you are also able to use its effect on summon to set a spell or trap from the deck, and you're typically going to set the Umbrage Veil, I believe it's called, which is just another extender. It's basically a monster, but it's in the form of a trap card, and thankfully that card's effect says it can be activated the turn it was set, so you're not behind, and it's not clunky to play with like Shade Brigadine. It's level 3, so you can easily make a rank 3 immediately after summoning it. But two of the new cards are great additions. That's definitely what this deck needed, so I cannot complain. Then, of course, onto the boy. We'll go ahead and show off the secret rare. I'm sad that when I picked these cards up, it was still like COVID era, so I really just had no incentive to ever try to complete this deck. I should rarity bump it because I'm imagining it's not so bad now, but we have the Torn Scales. This is just one of the best normal summons. In fact, this deck doesn't really have that many good normal summons, so I was completely fine with maxing out on this. The idea behind this card was that just like your Imseti, you're always finding ways to pitch bricks or just dead cards to always try to convert them to advantage. Of course, Torn Scales pitching something like a Forbidden Droplet or pitching something like a Dwamatef doesn't really feel that good. But again, this isn't a one-card combo deck like how some people would want to build Phantom Knights right now. This is a whole of hand, wombo combo. I'm going to break your board style of deck. So thankfully, he's not too clunky because, like I said, there's not really that many good normal summons. And I don't know. I don't see a reason why he would be playing less than, but I do see a world where maybe you cut down to 2. But again, I really don't know what you would play in place of him, since trying to stuff this deck with non-engine really isn't the greatest idea right now. One Silent Boots, mainly because in a 50-card deck, you're going to see less Horus, or less Phantom Knights names. So even though some people aren't even playing 3 boots now, if I was playing pure, I would 100% max out on this. But since this is a pile deck, and the deck definitely goes over 40 cards, you're going to always see less cards that this will be relevant to pair with. So this will always be something you just want to flow through with your actual combo, rather than trying to piece it together with something you have in hand. So you will never really be able to use this as an extension piece unless you happen to open this with another Phantom Knight's name, which, like I said, is now just becoming mathematically less relevant. But of course, banish from graveyard, find your spell and trap. Then we move on to the last two main deck Phantom Knights 1-1. I wanted to maybe bump up this one, like I said, to 3. That way your discard outlet was actually a lot more powerful, as you were always finding ways to make Phantom Knights consistently searchable. But just given how I built the deck, given how we wanted to fit some things in there, I just said, for now, one Ancient Cloak is fine, so it's just a kind of find this piece. There are ways to kind of search out the Phantom Knights cards, like, there's a Thrust package in here, and of course, Zombie Vampire, or or even just being able to link climb up into a Rusty Bardish. But at that point, that was your commit into the Phantom Knights boards, rather than just like kind of happenstance discarding into it. And then the Ragged Gloves is kind of the same thing, but it's just a Foolish Burial for the deck. So I would probably bump up Ancient Cloak instead of Ragged Gloves. I can see a world for 2 and 2, so it's less clunky if you open multiples. But Ancient Cloak is clearly the better card. Onto the spells and traps. One of the new rank up magic, Requiem. This is just like a revive from grave, then rank up immediately. The rank up is mandatory, so you can only activate this card if you're able to exceed summon immediately after using one body. So it isn't just a free extension like a Monster Reborn for the engine. You will have to rank up, so keep that in mind. Okay, I'm seeing my problem here. 1 second. So this card right here is the 51st card of the deck. It is also the 15th card on the side deck. So this deck profile is a little weird because I really actually wasn't sure where to put this when I was putting this together physically. I do believe that I settled on putting it in the side because it's kind of like an OTK button or a really just unnecessary extender. I find that Magic Force is actually one of the most unnecessary cards in the deck right now. And in fact, I would rather be playing the Mitsurugi Great Purification Trap rather than this card in the main. Unfortunately, this is a little more live, I guess, because in a world where there's dice rolls and you don't know if you're going first or you're going second, this ends up being more relevant just as a quick way to turn a break sword that has been revived off like a wings or something into a Raiders Knight, which funnily enough, there will not be a Raiders Knight in this deck profile, not because I don't think you should play it, but because I don't know where my copies are, but we'll get into that later. But this right here, the 51st/15th card in the side deck, most cuttable thing, I believe. Wasn't really sure where to put it, so it's here in the Phantom Knights part. So there's going to be a 14 card side deck, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you guys let me know if I'm missing something about this, but I just really don't feel like this is necessary. Then we have the Umbrage Veil, which, like I said, is the new piece of support that came out of Chaos Origins. Very simple. Use it. As soon as you set it, you have another level 3 body. There is, some other effects on it that really don't come up, but you're using as another body. Then we have the 2 Fogblade, playing 2 because this is just a good ratio. 3, it's already clunky enough as it is. But I find that in the combo lines, you're typically never setting 2. You're usually getting 1 off the body and using another as a revive. A very aggressive approach to the Phantom Knight strategy, but it is what it is. And then 1 Phantom Knight's Wing because you do want to have another in-engine Monster Reborn, something that you can recycle off of a new card that dropped that I'm sure you all know that we will be going over soon. On to the Mitsurugi package. We are playing the 3 big ritual names, the Saji, Kusanagi, and Aramasa. Then 1 ritual, 1 mirror, 3 prayers. So this is all the literal Mitsurugi names except for the 1 trap in the side deck. Anybody knows me knows I've been on Mitsurugi for the past couple months, and I just love his engine. I honestly believe there's merit to just playing pure even to this day. Non-engine really is at a premium right now, but like I said, the approach to building this deck was to say, instead of trying to open droplets or try to open super poly, you want to use an engine like this to wipe your opponent's board and say, you're going to answer my Murakumo and my really efficient engine or my rank 8 that I'm about to make off of it. And you're going to spend so much trying to slow me down that you weren't even aware that my main game plan was to normal summon Torn Scales pitch to put like, something else engrave. Oh, right. Ancient Cloak, search out boots, and then go off from there. So that's the whole idea behind playing something like this. This also, in a vacuum, if you only had Mitsurugi, can still technically go into the Phantom Knights engine because you easily put 3 bodies on the board that are dark, and then you could just go into Rusty Bardish immediately, and then Foolish a name and go off from there. These are the other Mitsurugi cards, but they're not named by Mitsurugi. So 3 pre-prep, 2 Record of Rights, 2 number 1 because I only own 2 right now, but 2 because this kind of feels like a comfort ratio. This is like a vibes-based thing. Because there's thrust, these become much more easier to search out Obviously, pre-prep is just better because it searches 2 instead of 1. There's an argument to cut it too because, opening mirror sucks, but it is what it is. I do like this card. I really do, but it only leads in Habakiri as a actual starter, as opposed to if this is pure Mitsurugi, then this could just be like another piece or a component to find a way to summon. However, because the only relevant thing it really does in this deck right now is to search Habakiri. Habakiri is the big choke point of the deck. So maxing out on all of these I do believe is redundant. So there is some truth behind this ratio. It's something that definitely needs to be experimented with, but maybe you're more concerned with actually seeing a starter in your opening hand rather than saying, like, it doesn't matter if I have multiple ways to Habakiri and afterwards it's just dead. Because, of course, with pre-prep, with Ragged Rights, you are able to turn dead cards into discard fodder. Then on to some of the non-engine. We have 2 Thrust, Rhoda, Foolish. This guarantees that whatever you're trying to play through, you always have ways to find your main engine, which is Phantom Knights, of course. Thrust can also search, your Mitsurugi pieces if you want to get aggressive with that. But I really do believe that this is a good Thrust package because it isn't just going to go find you board breakers, but if you already broke the board and now you need to go find a starter, there are plenty to pick from. And then we're on to 3 Forbidden Droplet. 1 called by says my combo resolves, and if your combo resolves, you win the game. And then Droplet says, I'm going to turn this very dead Dwamatef or this randomly open Ancient Cloak into a way to start picking away at your board. This also just turns dead, or I would say not dead, but like not the most usable bodies on your board into ways to convert, your very powerful spells that might get checked from like a Draco Tail Flame or something now can be used to start picking away at your opponent's board. This was honestly a lot better of a non-engine pick when I was maxing out on the Ancient Cloaks, which I said there's still merit to maybe considering a build like that. But it was really hard to find out ways to slim to try to keep it under 50. Now, I know you could play 60. Truthfully, I've never played a deck this big or consider seriously playing a deck this big. I really don't like going over like that 45 range. I wanted to keep this as slim and consistent as possible without being bloated by stuff like a bunch of non-engine that can honestly clunk you up. So I could even consider cutting Droplet just because, it's not really important to the main game plan, which is trying to break boards with other things. But Droplet is a premium card right now, and I do think you play enough cards to warrant it. You're not playing like imperms or anything, so, there's consideration. And then the last 3 cards in the main deck is the Dominus Impulse. Impulse is a big reason why you would play a deck like this. This is the dark deck. It is full of a bunch of dark engines. There's not really any confliction to playing this other than your Horus bodies that are coming back. You can't just use as beat sticks with effects. You're using them only as beat sticks if you impulsed. But that was never really the intention to play the Horus cards. Anyway, the Dominus Impulse is just a very premium card because this can sit in the hand and your opponent may not have a read on it. And this can check stuff like Fimena. This could check, Killer Tune Synchro. I can find situations nowadays where it's not as great as it used to be. But again, any deck that can play this definitely wants to run it. And I think it's 100% worth playing, even if hand trapping your opponent is not the main idea. It's just a nice end board piece if you find it, or something to hold in your hand for your turn when you're trying to play through their board and they end up trying to quick synchro or quick fusion or anything on your turn. Now, onto the extra deck to put things into a little bit more perspective. Of course, we got the boy, Rusty Bardish. Something to talk about this deck, too, is there is huge consideration to play this if you're somebody like me who typically likes to play pretty budget. All these engines are very cheap. The Mitsu deck was reprinted, so everything in there should cost, in theory, if you were taking 1/3 of the legendary decks, around $10. I'm sure, I know that's not exact, but if you picked up one of the legendary structure decks, you already have a very integral piece. Of course, if you just played pure Mitsu, you'd probably be winning locals anyway. The Phantom Knights cards themselves were all released in a very affordable package of the legendary hero decks that came out back in like 2019. I get that's been a while ago, but basically, at standalone prices, all the cards are very, very inexpensive and easy to pick up if you have access to them. And even the new cards out of Chaos Origins, there is only one Ultra and one Super, and none of them are more than a few dollars each. I believe the Ancient Cloak were about $5 when I picked them up, and I'm sure because this isn't the main thing everybody wants, they're going down. So that's just something I wanted to talk about really quick as consideration for why you'd play something like this, because this isn't just, like a structure deck, but it's like this is something that you could definitely customize. I do think Phantom Knights have pretty good longevity. They were a good deck even before the support. It's just not that great, obviously, since nobody plays them. They're just a very good engine. They're very pre-Fuwalos, good at Yu-Gi-Oh kind of engine, where you can definitely play them pure and stuff them with a lot more non-engine, and they're very consistent. They're very resilient into hand traps, and you can 100% break boards with cards like Rusty Bardish and another card called Break Sword, which we'll get into later. But of course, the boy, because he's generic and it says only 2+ dark monsters, that means all your engines other than PK get into PK. So this is not just an M4 piece, but this is also a bridge and just a really sick looking card that I'm very glad has a chance to make a comeback in the competitive landscape. Cherubini. Cherubini is a great card because, again, takes 2 level 3 bodies. This naturally just comes up in your PK engine and dumps for cost. I can't believe people still miss this even today. But for cost, you'll dump a level 3 body to boost its attack, which isn't really relevant. It's the idea that you're foolishing in a way that your opponent really can't respond to because cost can always be paid. Now, it is on an ignition, so it require your opponent to, quickly snipe the body off the board with something like Spark. But not really relevant since I think there's way better hits for this deck anyway, and Cherubini is not really a choke point, but it's more like here's another way to get an additional name before we link climb. 1 dark, because in theory, if you're able to make dark, you're also just able to go into Bardish immediately after because this revives a dark body to a zone, and then there's your link 3. And then 1 IP and 1 SP. There is world to consider. 1 more link, which is Access Code Talker. Something I'm finding with this deck is that when you do have that crackback, you might want to convert your bodies into something like Access Code because you've already burned through a lot of your combo pieces. It can be a little bit difficult to get into some of your other boss monsters, simply because if they answered your board, a lot of your Phantom Knights guys might already be banished, and there might not be a very easy way to come back. It's still pretty easy to get into things like a Break Sword for turn 3. Although you're only playing 1 because the extra deck is really tight, and your Bardish might be gone, so the 2 pops might just become a 1. So I just didn't really think it was super necessary to have 2 in the deck. But Access Code will convert the revived Horus bodies or revived Phantom Knights names that really can't go into anything into something worthwhile that, while we'll really only get 1 pop in this deck realistically, it at least is able to be big enough to at least secure half of your opponent's life points, and then maybe with 1 more Horus guy or 1 more lingering body or a revived Mitsurugi name able to close out the game right then and there. That's the only problem that I'm having with this deck is while the follow-up is insane, it's finding ways to make big guys to get over your opponent's board if they were able to, make some half board or put up a little bit of resistance. On to the Exceed cards. We have 1 Break Sword. Like I said, 2 is just a little too much right now since the extra deck is really tight with all these engines. But for those who don't know, you can detach to pop 1 card you control, 1 card your opponent controls. You can destroy your own Break Sword. This would trigger its effect where if this is destroyed, this can also be triggered into Rusty Bardish's a zone it points to. So those pair really nice with each other. But if this is destroyed, revive 2 Phantom Knights. They become level 4, and that's how you usually get your Dark Rebellion package, such as the Malevolent Scythe. Not the 11 scythe. This is level 3. This is the other rank 3 that you would be making in your combo lines. This says you're going to summon out 1 from deck if you detach. This is on an ignition effect. And then if this is destroyed, this will grab one of your banished Phantom Knights cards. So there's recursion here too. So combo pieces mainly, although this one is better for board breaking. Fantastic card, but a bit of a choke point. Then 1 Dark Rebellion, 1 Requiem. Dark Rebellion is, again, what you make off the Break Sword vibe. And then the Requiem is something you rank up to it with a new rank up spell. The Malevolent Scythe sticking onto the board. When this is summoned, we'll then trigger this to search out what you need immediately to go into the Requiem. And now you have a monster negate. You actually have 3 monsters negate, since this isn't once per turn, but its effects are only live when you have the Dark Rebellion attached under it. Then for a new card that was released in the TCG is the Shaman Knight. Just a very good extender and recursive end board piece where you're able to stick banished traps under it on summon or when a trap is banished. So Fogblade and Phantom Knight's Wing being the obvious targets. And then you're able to detach to summon equal to the amount you detach. So, sorry, like if you're looking for a level 3 guy, you would detach 3 basically. So that's all this deck has anyways. When that's relevant to this is the level 3. So very easy to actually do at least once in the combo line, and then you'll, on recycling that banished trap back into a detached Exceed material, have a follow-up banishable trap in your graveyard for their turn to put like a break sword into a column that Rusty Bardish points to. Now, this is where things get a little weird. So like I said, there 100% should be a Raiders Knight and an Arc Rebellion Dragon, because it's a very easily made, very easily findable OTK piece that you absolutely could find in this deck, and that would justify playing the rank up Magic quick play. However, I do not own them currently, so I'm an idiot. As soon as I get my hands on them, these 2 would be cut. However, there is an argument that you actually don't need that OTK piece, because in a deck like this, you have a lot of ways to flood your opponent and then pretty much kill them with enough big guys, at the very least on your turn 2. The Raiders Knight is a very good turn 3 piece, I'm finding. Either way, there's still some weird things to talk about with this deck. So number 1, we'll just go over what would be cuttable. The reason you would play these if you were considering not playing the Arc Raiders package. Oh God, Arc Raiders. I'm so sorry. The Arc Rebellion and the Raiders Knight package. Okay, I might have just coined that. That was incidental. The Dingirsu is a rank 8 that you can make off of 2 Horus bodies or 2 Mitsu bodies to snipe another piece off your opponent's board, non-targeting, so they might try to respond to it with something stupid, and then you might end up going for a 2-for-1 if your opponent isn't that smart. But what you would want to do, ideally, is get rid of something like maybe back row, like a droplet or a horn or whatever, and then battle with the Ding to get rid of something else, slap a Zeus over it, and then wipe their board, and then continue to combo from there. This is a little less relevant, and that's why it's like, I'm not really sold on this. This is something I wanted to play initially, but I'm not really sold. I just really want an excuse to play this Ulti Zeus. I picked this up at ASIN this past May, and ever since then I'm like, what's a deck that I could play Zeus in? And I'm glad Phantom Knights, was dropping soon, but I just really don't think it's that great right now. The other ranks that I 100% think you should be playing, and the best built version of this deck, is Zombie Vampire, of course, because again, 2 Horus bodies, 2 Mitsu bodies. If it doesn't get you there, it at least gets you into Dark. And going second, Dark would then be able to find you a body to make a Bardiche immediately for. The reason you would play Titaniclad and Photon Lord, Titaniclad answers a very easy problem, which is sometimes they have really nut board breakers, such as, they're thrusting to try to find a piece or whatever. Now, this won't be able to respond to Super Poly, and it won't be able to respond to Droplet if they send a monster, but something like Fallen of Virtuous also becomes a lot easier. I just feel that spell and trap removal is a huge premium and is definitely needed in a deck like this. And if you can't find something like an anti-spell fragrance, not that you would want to in this build, but if you couldn't, Titanic Galaxy. I've probably been saying the wrong name this whole time. Hope Harbinger. My bad. This would be a great end board piece to have, simply because it does something that you typically don't do in Phantom Knights, which is spell trap negate. Spell negate mainly. Sorry, it doesn't hit traps. Photon Lord is the next best thing because this is Nibiru proof, although Nib really isn't played right now. It also just checks like other hand traps, such as, you know, maybe they hit you with a droll, maybe they hit you with a weirdly timed ghost spell or something on a piece that you really would like to have brought back to board. Or it can hit end phase Phimena, or at least they wouldn't try to activate it, but it would check them or stop them from wanting to use that as a turn 0 interruption. They are light, so they do conflict with the impulse, but them being in the extra deck just means that this was really only turn 1 plays anyway, so you're not really looking to make these when you're under impulse anyway, so I really don't feel like they conflict at all. So these are the 3 rank 8s that I would play in this configuration. And then, like I said, these 2 are because that package is missing, but these are actually very strong consideration for cards that I would want to play, where I do think there is an argument to consider dropping the Ark and the Raiders. I can't believe I did it again. Anyway, on to the side deck. We'll just make this really quick because this is going very long, and then I'm not like super whenever I'm labbing a deck, I'm never like, oh, I need to have the side deck too, otherwise the whole thing's, you know, not gonna work. We have cards that are pretty necessary to play, such as Ash Blossom, because you don't care, the impulse doesn't conflict. This is just nice to have going first, you know, game 3, and you're like, all right, nice branded fusion dork. 3 Fuwalos, because if you see it, even though it's very difficult to in a 50 card build, this will help you find more engine pieces. Although Fuwalos and pile decks can be very difficult because sometimes you just end up drawing a bunch of like combo pieces, but that are engine requirements, such as like Mitsurugi Mirror, Dwamatef, that kind of thing. I'm not sold on like main decking it. 3 thrust targets, so Duster, Lightning Storm for more coverage, and then Talents, because, you know, the 3 things it can do are very busted. Then I would just play the 1 Judgment because honestly, you know, spell and trap removal or spell and trap negates is a premium, and this is your best option to do so. The Purification is the same thing. It's in the same realm. I would consider swapping out the Phantom Knight's quick play rank up to play this instead, because I find that even if you wanted to, even if it was a little bit clunky to open, you do end up relying on the Mitsu package more than you end up relying on any sort of Phantom Knights. I need to quick exceed a guy to rank up and then pop one. Like there's already ways to do that. And then this is a little bit of spice that may not be necessary either, which is the Deck Devastation Virus. This could also be EEV Eradicator. But the idea is, especially against Cool Tune, you want to side this in to immediately kill their deck. If they stuffed it with a bunch of hand traps, if they're searching out pieces with Killer Tune Synchro, which you can kind of hold it for, or you can hold it for their normal summon, you want to hit these pieces now so that, you know, the hand information or knowledge is pretty good, what they're doing to you. Not so much the knowing what their next top decks are, because basically after they pass back to you, they're dead. But this is, it's very good, and I find that you make this live a lot easier than something in like Pure Mitsu, just because you always have ways to play. If they stop one thing, they didn't stop the other. And then there's a 2 Droll. These, you know, just standard coverage, standard looking side deck right now. After more testing, after more, you know, maybe you have something different to expect in your locals metagame. Configure it however you want. The side deck really wasn't the biggest deal right now, but this video has gone long on enough. And I appreciate you all for checking out this really cool theory, this really cool list that I had. And if you have any suggestions or have any feedback, by all means, please drop it in the comments so I respond in a very smarmy and aggressive way and make you feel awful because you're clearly not as smart as me. And thanks be to God. Goodbye.